On Christmas morning in 1992 in Jacksonville, Florida, a young family sat together around a sparkling Christmas tree, opening presents, while the husband, Bonnie Haim, filmed the warm moments of his wife and little son. No one could have imagined that less than 2 weeks later, the young woman in that video would vanish from this world forever. And the only person who truly knew what happened in that small house was a 3-year-old boy. When the adults asked, the boy could only repeat a few hauntingly simple sentences. "Daddy hurt Mommy. Daddy shot Mommy. Mommy wouldn't wake up." But no one believed the statement of a child at that time, until 21 years later, when that same boy, now grown up, picked up a shovel in the yard of his childhood home and found his mother's remains lying right under the concrete, where he used to run and play every day. Welcome to the Case Files, where we break down cases that were once forgotten, but where the truth ultimately can't stay buried forever. Today, we're stepping into a real story about disappearance, about the silent fear of a woman, and about the chilling testimony of a child that no one dared to believe. In this episode, we're taking a deep dive into the infamous case of Mother Under the Concrete, the murder of Bonnie Haim, and the 21-year journey of a son exposing his father's crime. Part 1. Background. Characters. In the early 1990s, Jacksonville, Florida wasn't the kind of city people usually thought of when talking about gruesome murders, but rather a growing port city with peaceful neighborhoods and middle-class families choosing a stable, quiet life. In that seemingly calm picture, the Haim family, Michael, Bonnie, and their young son, Aaron, lived in a simple one-story house with a backyard, wooden fence, and shady trees, looking exactly like so many other American homes anyone could recognize. Bonnie Haim, born in 1969, was a young woman juggling work and caring for a 3-year-old son, described by colleagues and friends as gentle and hardworking, always trying to keep peace in the family, even as the pressure of her marriage slowly crushed her day by day. She worked in the accounting department of a construction company, where Michael also worked, which meant the two of them were not only husband and wife, but also co-workers, sharing the same space at home and in the office every day, making it even harder for their conflicts to find a way out. On the surface, Bonnie Haim appeared to be a hard-working husband with a stable job, but there were constant whispers around him about his hot temper, controlling nature, and tendency to yell at his wife and child, especially when financial pressures in the family increased and arguments became never-ending. According to court records, Michael was abusive toward Bonnie, and she had tried several times to secretly plan to leave him while he was away from home. The only person truly caught between these two currents of tension was Aaron, the 3-year-old boy who constantly heard arguments, saw his mother crying and his father slamming doors, without understanding why everyone was so angry. To the neighbors, this family seemed fairly normal, not too noisy, not causing trouble, just the occasional argument echoing out and then fading, like so many young couples struggling with money and the future. But beneath that surface of coexistence, Bonnie started confiding in co-workers about her growing fear, about wanting to leave the marriage, and even secretly opening a bank account in her own name so she could prepare an escape route for herself and her son. When Michael discovered the account and forced her to close it, Bonnie switched to another method. She gave money, little by little, to a trusted friend to hold for her, as if she were preparing for a one-way escape she could never turn back from. She had even rented an apartment a few days before she disappeared, planning to take Aaron and leave the tense household while Michael was away. Those unresolved conflicts kept being pushed down and covered up like a thin layer of dust on a table, just waiting for a hard enough collision to send it all flying up and reveal the suffocating, dark void underneath. Part 2. Unusual signs. In the final days of 1992, Christmas spirit wrapped the whole city. Malls played holiday music, decorations, and lights hung everywhere. Kids were excited. Adults were busy buying gifts. But inside the Haim house, tension was quietly building to the breaking point. According to accounts from friends later on, Bonnie said she had spoken to a lawyer about divorce, but she was terrified that if she made it public, Michael would lose control and do something irreversible. On January 6, 1993, shortly after the holiday break, Bonnie was last seen at work as she left the office looking exhausted, carrying a sense of unease that her coworkers at the time didn't recognize as a sign of impending tragedy. That night, according to Michael's statement, the couple had a big fight, and Bonnie left the house, driving away and leaving their 3-year-old son with him. The story sounded plausible at first, but the more you looked at it, the more cracks began to appear. Not long after that, police found Bonnie's purse, still containing cash, documents, and cards, thrown into a trash bin at a hotel near the airport, a location far too strange for any voluntary runaway scenario. Bonnie's car was discovered in a nearby parking lot on January 7, 1993, with the driver's seat slid far back, matching Michael's build more than that of a much smaller woman. In particular, a distinctive size 10 shoe print was found on the floor of Bonnie's car, matching a pair of Nike shoes Michael owned, proving that he had driven his wife's car after her disappearance, directly contradicting his earlier statement. Police started to doubt him. No woman planning to run away would abandon her purse, cash, cards, all her ID, then go completely silent without calling her son even once. But at that time, with no body and no clear signs of violence in the house, everything stopped at the level of a suspicious disappearance, leaving the case hanging, written down, but unable to reach any final conclusion. While the adults focused on the car, the purse, and reports, the only real witness, Aaron, kept repeating a few simple phrases that should have sent chills down someone's spine the first time they heard them. The boy told relatives and even social workers that Daddy hurt Mommy, Daddy shot Mommy, and Mommy fell down and wouldn't wake up. But since he was only 3, most adults assumed it was confusion or childish imagination. When interviewed by Child Protective Services on January 8, 1993, Aaron made several consistent statements. Daddy hurt Mommy. Daddy shot Mommy. Daddy put Mommy in timeout. And Daddy can't wake Mommy up. Some people recalled Aaron also saying that he saw Daddy pull Mommy into the bedroom. And those conversations were quickly brushed aside as too unbelievable, because no one wanted to accept the possibility that the father could be the killer, murdering his wife right inside their home. Part 3. The turning point. The crime scene. In the police files, Bonnie remained a missing person, although in the hearts of those close to her, the word missing grew more and more like dead with each passing year, only lacking the final proof. Over the years, Michael moved houses and tried to carry on with his life, even partially changing his name, while Aaron grew up with fragmented but haunting memories of a night filled with shouting. As an adult, Aaron was adopted by his maternal relatives and took a different last name. But his obsession with his mother never faded. He always believed she hadn't simply abandoned her child as his father had claimed. In 2004, before Michael was ever criminally charged, Aaron won a civil lawsuit over his mother's wrongful death, and the civil court judge ruled that Michael Haim was responsible for Bonnie's death. As a result of that lawsuit, Aaron was awarded ownership of his childhood home, the very place where all his painful memories began. In 2014, when the old Haim family home was being renovated, Aaron, now the new owner, decided to redo the backyard, removing a concrete slab that had been there since he was a little boy running around the yard. According to some sources, Aaron wasn't just casually fixing up the house. He deliberately bought back the property and began digging up the yard because he believed in what he'd seen when he was only 3.5 years old. At first, When a contractor used heavy equipment to tear out an old pool, the machine cracked a large concrete slab near an outdoor shower. During the digging, Aaron noticed something strange. Bone fragments, then part of a skull, along with several teeth still relatively intact, all buried deep beneath soil and concrete. Silent, but forcing the truth to the surface. Aaron used a sledgehammer to break apart the concrete chunks and found a plastic bag containing remains, and at first he thought it was just a coconut. I picked up what looked like a coconut and realized it was the top part of my mother's skull, Aaron recalled, voice shaking. When I looked back into the hole, I saw what appeared to be teeth. What the forensic team later collected was confirmed through DNA testing. It was the remains of Bonnie Haim, the wife and mother who had disappeared more than 20 years earlier, now returning to the exact place where all suspicion had begun. The body was no longer intact, but the burial location, the presence of bones and teeth, and a .22 caliber shell casing nearby showed that the victim died violently, not by simply walking out of the house as Michael's old story claimed. Notably, the skeleton was found directly under a patch of concrete poured not long after Bonnie went missing, as if someone had hastily sealed the ground, covering up something he believed would never be exposed. For Aaron, digging up his mother's remains with his own hands was both agony and relief, because he finally had an answer to the instinct that had gnawed at him throughout his childhood. His mother hadn't abandoned him. She had been murdered right inside their own home. Wanting to avoid media attention, Aaron wasn't sure whether to call 911 or contact someone tied to the original investigation, so he had a friend helping with the construction call a police acquaintance, while he tried to reach the original detective and left a message with his therapist. I left her a message and said, "I think I may have found my mother." Part 4. Investigation Evidence. Once Bonnie's body was discovered, the 1993 disappearance instantly turned into a murder case, and all eyes turned back to the husband from that time. Michael Haim, the man who had insisted his wife walked out on her own. Old files were reopened, and every small detail from that time suddenly became especially valuable, because now there was a body, a crime scene, and a chain of behavior that looked far more like a cover-up than a simple unexplained absence. Investigators recalled the purse tossed in a hotel trash can, Bonnie's car abandoned with the driver's seat set for a taller man, and the unusually long silence after she disappeared. They compared Michael's old statements with the new evidence, how he didn't report to police immediately, cooperated only minimally, and then quickly focused on gaining custody of his son and controlling assets. Another crucial detail was the .22 caliber gun Michael owned. At the burial site, they found a shell casing of the same caliber, matching the theory that Bonnie was shot before being buried under the backyard concrete. At the same time, Aaron's statements, once dismissed when he was just 3, were now entered into the official record, because social service documents and family testimony showed he had repeated the same phrases consistently over time. He said he saw, "Daddy hurt Mommy, even Daddy shot Mommy," then drag her into the bedroom, after which he never saw her again. These details now lined up with the location of the remains and the pattern of a domestic murder. According to some records, inmates who had shared a cell with Michael reported that he bragged about killing his wife and burying her body in the yard, an unguarded confession that became another piece tightly linking him to the crime. During trial proceedings, 2 inmates took the stand on a Wednesday and testified that Michael Haim had confessed to killing his wife while they were locked up together in 2015. Terrence Richardson recounted, "We were just having small talk, and he started telling me how he killed his wife, that he choked her because he was angry." Richardson said Michael believed his wife was having an affair. He got angry, and he did it. When forensic experts reanalyzed the old scene, they concluded it was highly unlikely that a stranger had broken in, killed Bonnie, calmly buried the body in the backyard, poured concrete, and vanished without leaving any other trace behind. Everything pointed toward the most logical scenario. Bonnie was murdered in the house by her own husband. The body was hastily buried in the yard and then covered with concrete, while the car and purse were staged to create the picture of a runaway. Part 5. Revealing the truth. In 2019, more than a quarter of a century after Bonnie disappeared, Michael Haim was brought to trial in a Florida court on second-degree murder charges, in a proceeding that drew significant media and public attention. The most heartbreaking moment of the case was when Aaron, now a grown man, took the stand to describe his memories of the last night he saw his mother, built from fragments of childhood recollections mixed with nightmares. He remembered hearing his parents argue, a loud thud, then seeing his mother lying motionless, and the blurry image of his father holding a gun, all hazy but consistent with what he had said when he was only 3. Aaron paused and took deep breaths at points during his testimony, while Michael showed no reaction as his son spoke on the stand. Prosecutors painted the complete picture: a crumbling marriage, a wife preparing to leave and take the child, a husband terrified of losing both his family and financial stability, who chose the most brutal solution to maintain control. Prosecutor Alan Mizrahi emphasized that was the only thing he could do to stop her from leaving and taking his son away. Michael's defense attorney argued that Aaron's childhood memories could be distorted, that there were no other direct eyewitnesses, and that the decomposed body made it difficult to determine an exact cause of death. The defense also claimed that police hadn't done enough to rule out a man Bonnie was rumored to be having an affair with. However, the jury didn't rely solely on Aaron's memories, but on the combination of physical evidence, behavior, and logic. The burial location, shell casing, the timing of the concrete pour, and the staging of the fake runaway scene with the car and purse. Michael Haim took the stand to deny killing his wife and burying her body in their backyard in 1993, declaring, "I loved my wife. I would never hurt her." But after several days of arguments and less than 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with its verdict. Michael Haim was guilty of murdering Bonnie Haim on the first night of January 1993, then burying her body in the backyard and pretending that his wife had run away. For Aaron, it was a moment full of mixed emotions. He had finally secured justice for his mother, but also had to face the bitter truth that his own father was the one who had stolen his family, his childhood, and the life of the mother he adored. Part 6. The Trial. Sentencing. During the sentencing hearing, the court noted that Michael had not only taken his wife's life, but had also left a deep psychological scar on his son, who had to live for years with lingering doubts, then later dig up his own mother's grave with his bare hands. Judge Stephen Whittington emphasized the cruelty of a man who chose to bury his wife's body under the backyard concrete, pour over it, and then carry on as if nothing had happened, even letting his young child play right above the spot where his mother was buried. On May 21, 2019, Michael Haim was sentenced to life in prison at Florida State Prison, with no chance of early release, closing the long path where he had many times believed he had permanently escaped punishment by hiding the body and exploiting the lack of evidence for years. Prosecutor Melissa Nelson stood on the courthouse steps after the trial and stated, "Today, the truth has been brought to light." For the justice system in Jacksonville, the case was seen as a late but well-deserved victory, showing that family murders, no matter how deeply buried, can one day be dragged into the light if someone is persistent and brave enough. And for Aaron Fraser, the name he took after being adopted by his mother's family, the sentence could not erase the pain, but at least it restored his mother's honor, proving she wasn't the heartless woman who abandoned her child, but a victim of a crime disguised far too carefully. Aaron said that after the sentencing, his years of living in fear were finally over, and he could at last begin to heal. "I know my mom is looking down and feeling proud of me," Aaron said in an interview after the trial, his voice still trembling but noticeably lighter. He also shared that finding his mother, as painful as it was, helped him close a chapter of his life that he could never move past without a final answer. In the days after Michael was sentenced, many people in the Jacksonville community spoke out in support of Aaron, praising his courage for not giving up, even when people around him once refused to believe the words of a 3-year-old child. Child protection and domestic violence organizations also used this case as an important lesson on taking children's statements seriously, instead of quickly dismissing what they say just because they are young. Bonnie Haim, the young woman who tried to escape a violent marriage but never got the chance, has now finally been laid to rest properly by her family, and her headstone no longer bears the word missing, but instead reads, "Beloved Mother Who Was Found." Conclusion and message. The Bonnie Haim case is clear proof that sometimes the most important witness is the one adults most easily overlook, a 3-year-old child who only knows how to tell the truth in the most innocent way possible. It is also a chilling story about how a family crime can be hidden so perfectly that life goes on right over the crime scene for decades, with the victim's body buried under the concrete foundation in the backyard, silent but never truly gone. Every time you hear a child say, "Mommy cried," "Daddy hurt Mommy," maybe adults should pause just a bit longer, ask one more question, listen more carefully, instead of rushing to dismiss it as kids saying nonsense. This story reminds us that justice can come very late, but it is still worth pursuing, especially when it belongs to those who could not protect their own voices inside the very home they once called a safe haven. Bonnie Haim never had the chance to escape the way she planned, but at least, after 21 years, she finally received the justice she deserved, thanks to the persistence of the son she loved until her last breath. And Aaron Fraser, who had to grow up with haunting memories, ultimately proved that sometimes even the testimony of a 3-year-old child can change an entire case if someone is patient enough to believe and to chase the truth to the end. If you want to continue exploring with us the cases of family crimes, buried secrets, and small testimonies that can decide an entire verdict, please support the channel by subscribing, sharing, and leaving your thoughts below. See you again in the next stories on the case files, where no truth can stay buried forever. Stay buried forever.